All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our first ever Interior Talk Live by Ohio Kentucky chapter. We first want to thank you guys for all being here, giving us your time today. And we definitely want to take a second to thank you for setting this all up, and thanking GBBN and Kolar for putting this all together for us today. So thank you guys so much. My name is Chelsea King. I am your Ohio Kentucky chapter president. Oh, I'm standing in front of myself. Oh, other way. But welcome. I hope you guys enjoy it. A lot of hard work's gotten put into this, so thank you guys so much for the committee again. We're going to hand it over to Rebecca Matheny, our VP of Student Relations.
Hello all. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in for this first ever Interior Talk Live that's going chapter-wide this year. So we're really excited to take the idea that Blue Lex has been doing for the past couple of years and extend it into our Friday forum here in Cincinnati, so that we can bring what's happening in the Cincinnati City Center to all of you and to highlight a project that's been happening here locally. So again, we're going to let the GBBN team and colleagues introduce themselves here in a minute. Just a quick little update to our students. We have our membership drive happening, so anytime between now and the end of the year, if you sign up for IIDA, if you're new to IIDA, now's the time to either sign in and become a member or renew your membership, and you'll get the rest of this year and into next year. And I'll be your VP of Student Relations for the 2018-2019 academic year. So if you need anything, I'm the person to answer your questions, as well as everyone in your local city center student relations team. So I'm going to hand it over and let us go on with our Interior Talk Live.
Great. Well, hello, my name is Aaron Anderson. I'm a project designer with GBBN Architects. I'm a graduate of the University of Kentucky. Go Wildcats, go Big Blue. And I studied down at University of Kentucky architecture.
Megan Marshman. I work for GBBN Architects as an interior designer, and I went to the University of Cincinnati. We're dividing on this side of the room, the UC grads versus the UK grads.
We're all cats.
All cats. But anyway, I'm just really excited to be here today and sharing this project with you all.
And I'm Mary Dietrich. I represent Kolar Design, so a colleague that worked collaboratively with GBBN on this project. We are an environmental graphic design firm that focuses on building experiences through the environmental graphic design lens. I'm also a University of Cincinnati grad and studied graphic design. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you guys today.
So I'm going to kick us off by providing a brief project overview. This project exists at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital main campus in Cincinnati, Ohio. The campus has a 135-year history to it. Started small, but over time has become a world leader in pediatric medicine and research. We have, as a combined team, have had the real privilege to help them through those years to successfully gain more notoriety through their environments and through their experiences in and throughout their campus, which is challenging to say the least, because we have up on here the campus as a collection of buildings that over the last 40 or so years have come online over time, and with a unique specialty occurring within each of those buildings. Sometimes it's inpatient, sometimes it's outpatient services, sometimes it's surgery. And over time, they adapt and change. And our team has spent a lot of time addressing those design issues, both in solving them functionally, but then solving them environmentally. And what you can see here are the colors that kind of cast on each of the masses. And they represent locations, building locations throughout, so that as anyone is navigating through the space or finding their way to and from specific purposes of their visit or stay, they know or have a sense of where they exist. Our real challenge that we had with this arrival project was that when one arrived, there was a real disconnect of appreciating where they were in this system. There was a disconnect on their sense of hope that their visit was going to bring relief to their ailments as well as stress. And so we, as a team, really focused on those occupants as it pertained to arriving. Now, just using this really quick, this is the main sort of urban grid right here, main artery called Burnett, and we have a single turnoff for arrival. And when we say arrival, we really mean how does one appreciate that they've landed at their initial destination, and it happens throughout. So one knows they're at campus by seeing obviously a big building, but then also appreciating it through proper signage and branding of telling them where they are. So, okay, they've arrived, and then they have choices to find their next arrival spot, which is either a drop-off arrival point here or an arrival point where a majority of patients and visitors go, which is underground. And so this diagram really kind of captures a subterranean view of a series of parking decks that one comes down from above and then traverses and finds a spot, but then has to find a way to get back up to the environment, the hospital environment. So what you can see here are these blue connections, which are elevators, that then land one into what we call concourse. It's essentially, it's the main boulevard that takes both staff and patients throughout all of those buildings, like a shift, like a skewered kebab, linking all of these buildings together. Now the problem, this is kind of showing a solution here, but the problem is that when one arrives, they aren't greeted by something that's organizing them. They're not greeted by something that identifies location. They're actually landing in spaces which show a real disconnect to the garage. About 5 or 6 years ago, I would say, Kolar and GBBN undertook a garage renovation project, which you can see on the lower set of images, that looked to take the sort of buzz and the muddiness of the garage as it was previously wayfront, like, painted, and, here I'm in section, level 3, area 2, what, all the nomenclature that aided to confusion. And what our teams collectively did was said, let's blow everything out and make and simplify it, and then let's provide areas of focus down here. And it made a tremendous impact at arriving individuals and bringing focus to them coming up. But you can see on the top images what they were previously coming into were very uninspiring spaces that did not have the elements to give to any visitors to help them know where they are, where they need to go, and then enter this big engine that's the institution. So this was causing great stress. This was really causing people who are scared for acceptable reasons of why they're visiting here. It was not providing confidence with family and visitors in knowing what's their next step to arriving to inpatient, because they have to get administered into a bed or going in their course of several examination visits in outpatient. So as you can see, really cramped, really challenged through a lot of different things, a lot of noise, a lot of visual noise. It's surprising to appreciate that in these institutions, a fair bit of it is almost, it's lawless in some ways. People will put up signs, and Mary is nodding at times, going, I can't believe they're doing this to our spaces, because it adds confusion. And when people see a bunch of confusing things looking for their attention, they'll tune out, and then they become lost, and they become introverted, and then they become stressed. So we start out this project by pointing out that this was an underserved problem for the institution. And you'll see here this kind of map of that first floor that spells out one, quantitative ways in which we use to discover problems. It's really important for everyone to appreciate that when taking on any problem, you have to discover what are the problems associated with it. What are quantitative measures that are that need to be addressed, and what are qualitative? And this particular map is an example of going around, observing with all senses that we have access to, sounds that are obnoxious and what's causing them. Identifying actual quotes from people, which if you were standing right next to them as a parent or a patient, you would be like, oh my gosh, like they're really lost, or I can't believe they just used that word, because that's how bad it truly was. And then in addition to that, there are hundreds of patient and family survey notes that provide insight as to what are they wrestling with. So we're taking kind of omnipresent comments from just witnessing, but then we're getting real good feedback from patients and families themselves. And then a couple pictures over on the side here, which show and depict one entry in particular, where again, when you come out of the elevator, the concourse is just beyond this glass, and so you have to make a couple of robotic turns that enter into a pretty busy moment in this side of the concourse. And so all of that kind of collective feedback that is important for us designers to really kind of manage gives us an appreciation of how do we prioritize? What do we need to do to make the most out of a client's dollar, but then also support and answer the needs of the patients, families, and visitors.
So as Erin said, as a team, what we looked at first are what are those priorities, and we developed 3 different principles that we felt really guided us in every move and every design solution that we had for the space. And so the way this presentation is organized is really around those principles and then how the team responded to them. So this first one is about creating hierarchy of space. And so in wayfinding, one of the ways that we help people find their way is a concept called intuitive wayfinding. Intuitive wayfinding is really about a sense of knowing. It's a gut reaction. And no matter where I am, I have some sense of confidence that I know where I am, whether I'm right or wrong. It's my sense of do I feel I know where I am, and I feel I know what my next decisions are, where I should be going. It's a sense of knowing. It's something that we're actually all taught as a young age. So we're in the month of October. Our little kids are really, really excited, and they're going to use intuitive wayfinding on the 31st when they go around, right? And the light, if the light is on the house, of the porch, they know I can go up there. That's intuitive wayfinding. We also know at a young age when we hear the sound of the ice cream truck rolling down the street, that's intuitive wayfinding. I know where the truck is. When we think about early city design and we think about what our architectural forefathers did in the design of early churches and places of worship, they used a steeple. That's intuitive wayfinding, all of those devices. So what we are looking to do in the space is to create a sense of hierarchy to help people know where they should go next, even without signs and other aids. So Megan's going to talk a little bit about how we did that through creating hierarchy.
So for us, I think what we were really trying to figure out is how to clear out a lot of the noise. There was a lot of different patterns, a lot of different texture, and a lot of different information coming at our families all at the same time. And so what we tried to do is use both the building location system of color, but also the absence of color in the space to really start to help us do that. And I think we started to set up a system for us that was repeatable and usable again at all of the locations to help do that. And then really try to put that color and that texture impact at the locations in which we're going to assist with that intuitive process. And so you come out of an elevator that has some color to it and pulls you. You see an animal ahead of you that pulls your child into this space. You get to that animal and you can see the wayfinding board that tells you how to get around the hospital. Just beyond that is the welcome desk. And so it was trying to connect a series of experiences in a language that was going to be helpful and effective in that process. And I think thinking about the whole family too, you know, from children coming with their parents to their parents as well. So I think one of the things we really liked in this image was giving ourselves space to pause as well and make those decisions and see what's in front of you. Having a place to pull over, park the stroller for a minute, get your kids' coats off, get everybody situated, and then the path is still kind of clearly laid out in front of you. So I think working that all together was a big part of how we tried to really simplify the messaging that was coming at families as they were coming in, and make sure that that messaging worked in the reverse as you were leaving. And so, you know, using the red and the orange and the blue, it kind of actually helps pull you back to the elevator as well, not just come into the space, but make sure that that parking diagram is easy to find and quickly, easily locatable, and it pulls you back into the elevator lobby as part of the leaving experience. And so from start to finish, we've helped support you and guide you along the way.
So the second principle is really about placemaking, and Megan mentioned it a little bit here. It's a really important pairing with the hierarchy of space. When we think about wayfinding, those that have studied wayfinding, the earliest academics and researchers of wayfinding understood that each of us, to find our way in a space, we create a mental picture in our mind. And the way we create that mental picture actually depends on each of us individually. And it depends on our background and where we came from. There's really interesting studies about different countries and how they wayfind based on how their cities were set up. Here in America, we have wonderful organized city structures, right? And so we speak about north, south, east, west. In Europe, lots of organic street patterns, north, south, east, west, isn't so easy, right? But they have wonderful landmarks and steeples and other things. In other countries, paths and streets aren't so well defined, so we can't speak about them by street names. So our goal here in terms of wayfinding, no matter what our vehicles are, is to create a memory, create a visual that helps us guide us through the space. And with this project being a children's hospital, it was the opportunity to bring child-friendly elements to the space so that, as Erin said, we can interact with those patients and families in the way that they want to be interacted with. And the second principle of placemaking that's very important here to wayfinding is a concept we call meaningful redundancy. Well, that may seem like, why do you do that? But again, because wayfinding is so individual, if you think about your family members, if you've ever asked for directions of your family members, there's usually a joke in families. Somebody might say, go down to the corner, make a right on XYZ Street, make a left, go north, go south, those types of things. Others of us might say, go down to the UDF, make a right at the Walgreens, right? We use different vehicles in our speaking. And so meaningful redundancy is recognition that we're all different. Some of us are visual, some of us are oral, some of us are a combination of each. So when you see the spaces that Megan's going to describe, the layering of the color philosophy on top of the visual philosophy, in this case the sculptures that were incorporated into the space, on top of the language philosophy, the location names, that is meaningful redundancy, and the goal here is that we're speaking to different people and what they remember.
So as we kind of really started to think about place, it was really important to us, and I'll speak a moment about, we kind of cycled around a few different very key moments along the path that we really wanted to create impact. But I think it was really about a layering of moments. And so kind of taking it down from, okay, we've kind of created a hierarchy, but what's that next layer of engagement? And that's right, the animals started to appear, and taking a column, which was a really great bold wayfinding solution along a very long concourse. So you've got orange columns that help bring you back to the welcome desk at A, and then they're red at location B and blue at location D, but then adding that next layer to it too. And so one of the things we get a ton of feedback and comments about is on the columns, we've added this bumpy texture, and the kids are always running up to them and running their hands around them and running around the columns. And
A tactile memory.
exactly. And so having those kind of elements as a layer to it, we found to be really added a lot of meaning and purpose to the experience of this space, and really helped with that recall and memory of where the path that they had taken on, because a lot happens for these families from the moment they walk in until they walk out. I mean, some of them I think feel like they've lived a lifetime just in a few hours with some of the information that they have to take in. So you go to the next slide. So what we did is we kind of created a system for ourselves as to how to understand the space, and then deployed that at each of the locations. And so it was always about trying to create a meaningful moment at the elevators, giving ourselves a space just off the elevators to pull aside and have that respite moment, having the key moment of the columns at each location, both for kind of pulling you into the space, but also the recall in reverse. And then ganging with that column, the wayfinding information. So having that digital board with the information. And then beyond that board, having the welcome desk. I think one of the things we talked a lot about is also that different people like to bring information in differently. So some people are going to want to go to the board, they're going to want to figure out their path on their own and just do it themselves and talk to no one. Other people want to pass by the board entirely, go to the desk and get personal information and directions given to them in person and provided guidance. So kind of being able to give all of that to different people as part of the experience was important, but without over-cluttering the space. So making sure that we had those moments collectively strung together, and then that language repeated at each location so that we were always giving that back. Now, because this was a renovation and not a new building, it couldn't always look the same at every location in terms of where it sat in the space, but we did what we could to try to make that as repeatable and memorable as possible.
The other great opportunity in this space, this is the one space that got a little bit more of an addition, is there was the addition of a broadening of the glass curtain wall, right, in this space. And from a wayfinding perspective, when we're orienting families to a new space, to a new campus, the most impactful thing is actually the view from where you came from. So the idea that the families could drive into campus, park their car underneath in the ground, you know, in the parking garage below ground, and come up and see back out to where they drove in is an amazing, both creation of sense of place, right, because it creates a beautiful, welcoming environment, but also helps us understand where we came from and gives us that sense of knowing. So last principle here is about neutralize and simplify, which again, all three of these really work well together. We wouldn't be able to create hierarchy of space. We wouldn't be able to create a sense of place unless other things felt quieter. And so that's what neutralize and simplify was all about. It was creating pause moments in between the hierarchy so that you could really appreciate the hierarchy. And this one involved quite a bit of conversation with the owner to relook at policies about how would they manage this space long term, because if after the project went away, everything came back, then all these principles that we worked so hard to set up would really begin to come back to the same status quo as before. So oftentimes that relationship with the owner becomes so important in terms of how the space lives on.
It's educating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a huge concern for us was, you know, we've created a really simple system that's pretty clear, very intuitive, and with a lot of intentional emphasis. And so we tried to build in things like, you know, digital signage moments next to the welcome desk. So rather than sticking up a bunch of signs, can you submit your information to a system and it cycles through and talks about the flu clinic and the lectures that are coming up, or the different opportunities to meet a celebrity or something like that that they want to communicate to the children's families that are staying there, and trying to do that in an organized, purposeful way. Trying to make sure spaces like this stay the way that it's intended to be, and that we don't start adding more clutter back into this space. Because I think what we took away from the whole experience was really that purposeful intentionality can so easily go wrong in the long term, and making sure that the organization was completely bought in on those philosophies, and that they're supporting it all the way through their administration of the space in the long term, so that we can kind of hold the system together as a successful tool for the future of their organization.
I'll add to that. So a simple example of buying in, or at least like decluttering and trying to maintain. A lot of times in entrances, you're often found with walk-off carpets. And a lot of times those are loose, they kind of go out, they can be rolled up and taken away, but generally a facility director or the EVS or whoever's taking care of the space, they'll just leave them out. So even when it's not really useful, they'll just leave them out. So what we would have had, and for the most part, we don't have them, would be rugs and runners that kind of draw one's eye down. Wouldn't say destroy a space, but impact a space because of their presence, their utilitarian presence. And what we worked on was, we have arrival down here, and we shared the arrival points in the garage. What we looked at, well, what can we do to improve walk-off conditions down there, so that in the dirty space where slush is melting off of cars because it's wintertime and people are walking through it and getting to the elevators in the garage, how can we get it off their feet before they even come up here? And so it's solving the problem, maybe expanding the area in which we're focused in, but solving the problem so that we can eliminate some of those habits, or eliminate those needs, because they're really good needs. You don't want anyone slipping and falling, so you want to make sure that no one is injured from it. So that's an example of again, further educating a client and making sure that you can guard an experience. Next.
So I think one of the things we thought was really important to share with you all today is, we go to school and we go to interior design classes, or we go to architecture classes, or you go to graphic design classes. And I think what is really special to recognize is that once you get into the industry, you rarely work isolated within your discipline. I mean, this was generally an interior renovation project with a small addition, but by no means were we staffed entirely of interior designers. It took a collective effort of diverse thinking and coming from different backgrounds and having different project approaches, and it took all of us collectively together, plus a team of about 6 or 8 additional individuals who helped us support on the project that also have varied backgrounds from architecture and graphic design, environmental design, that help support this team. Engineers, industrial designers, furniture vendors, that it took artists, that it took to put this whole project together. And I think no element in this space was specifically an architectural move, or specifically an interior design move, or specifically a environmental graphic or wayfinding move. And I think the columns are a perfect example of where it was a huge wayfinding tool, but it also became a significant interiors component, and the material selection added to the experience. And so it was all about the layering and working together in a way that I think we kind of felt like we were just one team and one company at that point. I mean, we approach it it's not them, it's not us. We're working on it together, and we're looking for those opportunities together. And I think what it created was, we just absolutely love these photos, because I think it really tells such a story of how people are now experiencing the space that we designed. The animals are creating family engagement moments. The patterns and textures on the furniture are just adding that extra layer, because they're covered in animals and in sort of a hidden Mickey way, and the kids love to look for it. The touching the texture, it really creates a much more immersive and experiential space. And I don't think any one of us could feel like we would have done it or could have come up with the solution just out of our own personal education or experiences.
We also, so at the end of each project, well, before and after, we do a post-occupancy evaluation. A little different maybe than some that you might be familiar with. And as Erin mentioned, the qualitative and the quantitative side of the research. One of the things that this whole team learns from, and our firm happens to facilitate, but the whole team really engages in, is that after the project we go back and measure, did we achieve the goals? Did we achieve the desired experience that the owner, that we worked with the owner to define resonates with their brand? And we just had some of the data come back in. And as a result, it's the whole space has bumped up 41% from before to after in terms of its feeling of friendliness, something that we measure. And in a hospital, that's actually quite a big deal.
Right. Very, very tough critics when it comes to a hospital feeling friendly. So that's a huge, huge bump.
It's increased 34% in cheerfulness. Again, huge. If you can think about, I'm coming because I need stitches, I have a broken arm, I'm going to have surgery. And 26% in terms of uplifting, a sense of feeling uplifted. And Erin showed the great research that the team did before, and he talked about some of the verbatims that we all heard before. The verbatims today, as Megan said, you hear the kids running around the columns, right? Ooh, ahs around the columns, the bumpy columns. The little girl in the yellow shirt was so fun on the photo shoot of this project because she ran in circles with the biggest smile on her face. And you see kids running up to these animals and giving them a high five or giving them a hug, and mom and dad pulling out their phone to take a snapshot or a selfie of them. And I think, you know, even back to some of the original notions of intuitive wayfinding, you know, mom and dad or caregiver are so stressed out sometimes trying to remember, what time is my appointment? Who do I have to see? What questions do I have to ask? And so today in the concourse, you hear mom and dad might say, well, where did I park? And it's the little kiddos that are able to say, Mom, we parked at the Caterpillar, remember? So if we can have the Halloween light on the porch, the ice cream truck, the sound, or the Caterpillar that the kids know how to find their way, then we feel like we've all kind of succeeded in hitting those principles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, it's just an absolutely fantastic project. You talked a lot about the 3 principles that were established for this particular project. Could you maybe speak a little bit about your strategic approach, either from GBBN or Kolar, about how you approach other projects? Is this a similar methodology that you utilize in your own design practice, or was this very specific to this project in particular?
Well, I would say that this is how we want to work, and when we're working at our best, that this approach to unpack the problems and get boots on the ground to experience. Now, speaking from, let's say, existing conditions, but it could be anything from an architectural stance of like going out to an empty site, obviously, and more or less appreciating what forces exist out there. And the forces can be natural, but then they can be man-made. And so I think when we can wrestle solutions and deliver them beautifully and with depth, in the sense of like all the things that this project has, I think that we're doing it right. So yes.
And I think one of the other things to add to that in terms of how we approach projects is I think that getting the client buy-in and their understanding and what those principles mean. We often write a set of goals and then we translate them to architectural principles, and we really tie those together and try to make sure they understand that this design move is not coming from a wholly abstracted place. It's very intentional and it ties back to a specific goal. So what we shared with you today were how we took the project goals. We wrote those principles specifically from the project goals as a way of saying, okay, these are your goals. These are the design moves that we have to make in order to achieve your goals. And so getting that client buy-in and understanding about that is kind of how we achieve success and got yes, yes, yes throughout the process, because they understood how that specific move was achieving their goals, and it didn't leave it on the chopping block for a value engineering opportunity.
Subjective, right? It gives us measurable criteria throughout the project for our internal teams and for the owner.
Great. So thinking about that non-subjective approach, you talked a lot throughout the entire presentation about different elements of research that informed some of the decisions or maybe even the goals. And so I was wondering if you might be able to talk about that part. What role does design research play in your decision making for this project or for all of your projects from an individual point of view?
Sure. It makes an immense importance. It's immensely important to all of our projects. So I think probably each of our firms looks at design research all the time for the major trends. So Erin spoke about them in the beginning. The idea of reducing anxiety and creating comfort in healthcare experiences wasn't because we all said so or we all observed it. We did, and that is true. But there is evidence that speaks to, evidence and research that speaks to when you enter those facilities, if your anxiety is heightened, then the visit success and the outcome of the visit decreases. In addition to functional issues such as if I'm lost, if I can't find my way, because I'm anxious, because of the environment, I might be late. So it has an impact on the bottom line to the hospital that's trying to deliver time after time. So there's a set of general research that's immensely important to all of the work we do. That's a fundamental base level of what we're trying to create. But then in addition, the use of the observations, the use of interviews with staff, the use of focus groups and interviews with families are all about really trying to understand what are the nuances that we as a design team need to understand for this space that we have to achieve to hit that underlying research and bring it to life and bring it forward here. And so, even there's research that talks about garages, for example, and underground garages experientially are the most difficult. Nobody wants to be underground, right? And so all of the moves that the team are making are to try to overcome some of those myths.
Well, expanding upon that, you talked about two different types of research. Secondary research, where you're gathering information, scientific data, psychological, anthropometrical data to inform your decisions, as well as doing primary research such as interviews. Is this something that you do 50% of the time on your projects, 100%? What would you say? And then to build off of that, with the secondary research, where are you finding that information? Maybe to help guide some of our students where they might be able to search those out or the topics that they could be looking at.
So I would say 100%. Okay, 100% of the time. And from a secondary standpoint, there's this wonderful thing called the internet that makes it so easy for all of us, right? There's definitely paid subscriptions to journals and academic resources, but there's a lot that's just available to all of us without those sources. So simply just searches around experience, environment, case studies, research, journal entries, those things around this topic that you're studying. There's so much out there. And in addition to the published research, the academic research, the rigorous research, there's also wonderful professionals that are speaking about some of these things and the overall summaries that they found from their research. So it's all really wonderfully readily available, which is really helpful.
I think that raises a really great point that as academics yourself, you're in an environment where you have access to this academic research. So, when you get to be a professional, you have to have paid subscriptions. So take advantage of your library and the resources that they offer to you while you have that chance right now.
Mm-hmm. I think there's sort of two different trends that I think have really manifested themselves specifically in the healthcare industry, and that's evidence-based design and post-occupancy evaluations. And so, and I think that's where a lot of the rigor has developed from, partially just because I think we're so interested in learning about our clients, but then to be able to do that in a way that we've researched specific metrics and then at the end, going back and asking people about their experience observing this space and really understanding it, we can actually then bookend the project and say, look, not only did we feel like we did, check the boxes during design about your goals, but we also check the boxes on, look at the difference in the metrics. Like, you know, with Mary being able to include those and share those for our team, that's huge for us to be able to say, you know, our project achieved these measures of success. And so by going in with specific research and specific tools in the front end, we can then also come out at the back end and say, you know, our design didn't just make people feel good, it actually achieved things for people. And I think that adds that kind of extra layer of depth that makes what we do so valuable to our clients. And I think it moves it away from a subjective relationship to a complete value add for our clients.
And one kind of addition to those forms of research are conferences and expos where you can go, and again, if you're given opportunities when you leave the academic environment and get into the profession, when you have an opportunity to expand yourself at those types of events too, they have a lot of information that you can specialize and kind of say, I want to see that, I want to see that, I want to see that, and then bring it back and share it with others. And then a lot of times at those expos too, you can talk with industry leaders around furniture and other specialties that have knowledge that usually comes with data and research. So.
I think this raises a really great point too. Students, you have the opportunity, being again in the classroom and in an academic environment, talk to your professors, talk to your faculty, ask them what projects they're researching and what they're working on. Many of them are conducting their own research, primary research projects, or writing academic papers. So engage your faculty locally and find out what they're doing to see how that might be able to be integrated into your own work. I think that's something that my students often forget about, and I try to bring as much of my research into my classroom, but I remember being a student having no idea what my faculty were working on, so it's a prime opportunity to engage that. Expanding the POE a little bit, I think the post-occupancy evaluation is such an interesting facet to the process that we often don't get the financial resources to do in many of our projects professionally. And you talked about getting the hard data back about happiness. And I'm wondering how you develop that survey. What methods are you using? It seems maybe like a Likert scale, but could you maybe tell some of the students what types of things they could research or find out about to develop their own? Absolutely.
So there is a whole world of specialty around survey development itself, right? So this is a wonderful client partnership that this team has. They are immensely supportive of the work that we do and give us amazing opportunities. So speaking to the rarity of the POE and the opportunity to do that, yes. Kudos to this client and their vision for that. But the way we started actually is with a researcher. We sat down with a researcher who helped us develop the overall methodology, and where we started was really understanding, what are we measuring? What is the brand experience that we're trying to create here? And then how do we create a series of questions that get at those answers? And that's a really tricky nuance of what you ask and then what information you get back. And I will say it's not static, right? If there are existing methodologies out there that have been proven in terms of their validity, statistical term, then you can use those. And there are published research that talk about the validity measures of that. But yes, we do a 5-point Likert scale. Likert is a established, very valid scale. It's typically a 3 or a 5-point scale, and there's a whole bunch of studies around why 3 and 5. And we ask a series of questions. We also ask a series of keywords. So some of the data that I gave you back about this project is around how would families describe, and staff, we do it with staff as well, how would they describe the space? And we're looking at pre and post change. So we're seeking about 100 respondents pre and post so that we can measure them. We want to have enough participants so that it's valid. You know, if it was an N of 1, participant of 1, right, it's one person's opinion, we're looking to even out the curve. We also gather verbatims back, and those verbatims for us as designers give us clues and tips, just like the qualitative research, just like the firsthand research, of, okay, this is what my number from the Likert score said, but this is the why, right? And the beauty about the partnership with this client is this has become what's called a longitudinal study. So we have done this type of research, the pre and post survey work, for the past 10 years across every major project that they've done, capital improvement project. And we use that not just to learn about the individual projects, but we share that knowledge back for the whole team so we can all get better as a team. And what it's helped the owner do is engage more people in their organization, because what we realize is it's not just about the design that we do, but it is about the policy and what they do with the space after we all finish. And that has become an amazing conversation. And then that data over time helps us see the process improvements and the opportunities that we can make and they can make in this partnership.
Yeah. And I think what is a really good takeaway from what Mary's been sharing is I think this isn't just something we're seeing in healthcare. This is not just a short-term trend. This is something, as you guys get into the profession, we are going to be demanded more and more and more to have credible outcomes, whether it's a workplace design project or a higher ed project. As we move into a world of big data and everything is about metrics, I think we're going to be challenged more and more in the profession to be able to frame up what we're doing in numbers and data and statistic responses, not just the emotive. And while we want to be super successful in the emotional response to spaces, we want to make sure that that's quantified and understood and explained back to owners, because they're going to be held to a higher and higher standard of how to invest their money in their projects. And they're going to want to know that they're doing it with designers that can spend their money really well.
Yeah, I concur. I do some consulting as well with design and architecture and interior design firms for the same reason, is that there's a growing trend of evidence-based design decisions. Clients are demanding it. We want to make the best decisions possible that are informed, not in the abstract, and that evidence base really helps us to understand that strategy moving forward. And it's a growing field for all. If we talked about collaborative at the very end, many different design disciplines are seeking further education, getting a master's in design research, going on and being a specialist in design research. We've heard the term design thinking as a buzzword for many years now, with IDEO and others doing that kind of work. And it's become an integral part of the process, as you heard here today. So that's something as an interior designer or any designer to consider as you progress in your own career, if you wanted to carve out that specialty for yourself as well. Again, kind of building on that research piece, I think it's really fascinating how incorporated it was. Part of my own personal work is in sensory memory and sensory experience, particularly in the materiality. So I thought that was very fascinating how you developed a multi-layered strategy, both from the color, from the site perspective, the association with the wayfinding and the animals, et cetera, and also the tactility. And I was curious if any of the other senses were incorporated, whether fragrance or sound or smell was a part of the process.
In this one, there was not.
Yeah, I think.
Well, with the exception
Sounds a little bit.
of trying to control some of the sonic trash that
Okay,
exists.
that's part of it.
So
right?
so there's areas that we discovered along the way that with some modifications, we could remove some of the stressors acoustically.
Fantastic. I think that's part of it, right? When we often think of sensory memory from a sound perspective, it's what we're adding to or hearing, but a big part of it is what we're removing to provide. We talked about the white space within the space itself that we're designing, with those moments of pause or respite. So in that point of view, you were definitely trying to remove some of the noise in order to create those moments.
I think the one other piece that was included from a sensory standpoint is what I'd call gamification. We didn't talk about it much, but one of the pieces that we learned in the early discussions with families is how much this main public concourse is really a destination in terms of, it's like a vacation. That sounds very odd. But imagine if you are a child, if you are a parent who is staying for a long time in the hospital, getting out of your room anytime you can get out is a vacation. And so they use this concourse to go visit different parts of the country of the hospital, right? So along this whole concourse are all kinds of positive distractions, is what we call them in healthcare, which are opportunities for fun, for levity, for uplifting moments that provide positivity. So there are Nuno Aaron, if you're familiar with it, lit benches that serve a seating and a pause function, but also a way that kids can play and touch and the colors move. There is an interactive ball machine that is part of the overall design, and the kids can come up and wave their hands and make the balls move throughout the whole device. There are hidden Mickeys throughout the entire concourse, and there is a treasure hunt map that the kids can get at every welcome center and go find all the hidden Mickeys throughout the whole concourse as part of the journey, as well as a couple other interactive pieces. So gamification was another really important part of this whole experience.
Yeah, I think that's a good part of the sensory experience that we don't often think of. It's in the top 5, but it's becoming more and more an engagement sensory experience component too. With that also, I was really curious about your color selection. They were very vibrant and very specific color, and I was wondering if there was anything that informed those specific color choices.
So I think there were 2 components to it. One is an existing color system that I believe actually Eva Maddox started, right? And then you guys built off of.
We did, yeah.
Back. So it's sort of been a long-standing color system, if you will, at the hospital about coding those different buildings with different colors. So orange has been associated with A for 10, 20 years. Red and pinks with B and so on. But what we did, at least kind of looking at the architectural palette, is we actually took some cues from the wayfinding palette. Architecturally, those paint colors we've been using to support this building locations were actually rather grayed out. And because rightfully so, you don't always want bold pops of colors everywhere, but in order to do the concourse, we actually felt like how color was being used was far more as a wayfinding tool than as an architectural accent. And so what was important to us was to really take cues from the wayfinding color palette that Kolar has been working on and freshen up and brighten up our architectural palette to reinforce and support that palette.
And hopefully you saw in the slides, but that color begins in the garage and it's carried up vertically along the elevator. So the elevator lobby in the garage has the same color palette as the elevator lobby in the building, and it's reinforced through the signage and the graphic elements and even artwork throughout the whole space. So, and even the furniture, the consideration of furniture and how all those colors come together.
One more aspect of expanding upon that idea was the lighting design. There was some really interesting ceiling articulation. I was really curious if you might be able to expand upon a strategy for lighting.
Well, I think what we wanted to build off of was more of a kit, as kind of Megan kind of described, where a real challenge with this project is the fact that each building location has its own unique existing conditions. And whether that might be a duct running overhead that you can't see when you first start, to existing lighting that either wants to be reused or at least become a factor into what we were creating. And so, but we knew that if we could keep and make a memorable experience at the point of entry, and then obviously reminding them when they come back, that's different from what's experienced throughout the institution, that we knew that we were going to make a very unique moment for memory. And so in those immediate spaces of the elevator, we used a lot of downlight, wall washing light, which helps to, again, provide a sense of levity in the space, while at the same time, curiosity within the other elements that are in and around. So like the thin wall, the ceiling to wall kind of accent that happens at every location, provide a sense of hidden exposure was something that creates curiosity and creates a sense of wonder that you get right away. And then as you move away, then it's a matter of finding the right solution of lighting that then can blend in with the surroundings, because the project has to stop. And so I would say that to reinforce that placemaking, that light is really light was really instrumental at distinguishing it from the neighboring spaces.
Right. And expanding upon placemaking and light, many of the images showed the inclusion of daylight, whether that was the expansion of the floor-to-ceiling glazing components, where you talked about seeing inside and then looking back out. Could you speak a little bit about daylighting strategies maybe, and beyond that?
So one interesting thing about the concourse in general is that there are a lot of areas where there is glass. And there are areas where it's actually punctuated with really big architectural column racks as you go down. And so, did I do that?
It really shows
yeah.
that.
So down in here, when we had the opportunity to expand, we wanted to make a much more connection to, as Mary said, about connecting one to the experience that they had previously when arriving via car, which is just beyond these individuals over on this side, and relocate them in the campus. And so there we have, I mean, it's a tough project to capture and photograph, but when you do come out and look across this new lawn that was created outside in garden space, and then you take in the real landmark treasures of research that happens beyond, just beyond right here, there's a big washed out building that was recently done. It puts you in the perspective of using glass to connect you back to the institution and see it in ways that, A, you're secure because you're inside, you're safe. You have all of these great things that support you internally, emotionally, experientially, entertainment-wise, and positive distractions. But then you know you're in the good hands. You're going to be taken care of because people in the buildings beyond have got your back.
So we talked a lot about the patients and the children and the families attending. Any research data from your POE about the people working here, their reaction to this?
So we're still collecting some of the POE data. I will say one of the things that we worked really hard to do through this project is to provide training back to the staff to help educate them about all the different moves and why they were made, because they're the front line. They're the gifter, right? They are the giver of this experience to the families. And so we did a series of training sessions with each of those folks. And I will say the feedback was tremendous just from that aspect of the project alone. And when we see them now in the concourse, they give us wonderful antidotes. We get little notes all the time about the great things. The folks that work in this particular space, sorry, Megan, behind your head, that Erin was just speaking about, where there's now an abundance of natural light, feel so much happier being there because of the view, because of the natural light, because it's just a little bit more open and a little bit less compressed and a little bit more chaotic. So less in terms of the official kind of data, but more anecdotal at this point.
Right.
I do think the opportunity to work with staff, that was special, and that's not something we often get to do on projects. And as you might hear the buzzword change management, we do what we can to implement strategies for our clients, but sometimes on projects that information just doesn't get communicated outside of the core small group of people that you're working with, and it doesn't percolate necessarily out to all the intended users of the space. So sometimes our best intentions, if they're not intuitively designed enough, may not get communicated through. But being able to walk through the hallways with the welcome staff and point out all those different things and why we did what we did, it helped them feel included in the final results, and that they're also now invested in making sure that the space is successful because they see how it helps them do their job as welcome and greeter staff and first line staff better. So I think that was something really special, and I think something we'd love to be able to encourage more of our clients to engage in that kind of sort of end of project wrap up behavior, because I think it just ensures success for all of us.
Okay, so one last question. As a sustainable design researcher myself, you just talked about biophilia and the connection to nature through those amazing windows. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask how sustainability, both from a well-building standpoint or LEED or just philosophically, may have impacted or influenced the design process or the outcome of the design?
Well, I think that, where we started with this project was, at least, well, I'll start from the outside, was very car focused. It's very vehicle focused. With what we didn't indicate was that space that is green and grass right there was actually, it was an auto ramp, and it was a rampway that existed to take us down into the garage.
That was your view.
That was
Wow.
your view.
What a transformation.
Yeah. And so again, back to the sort of discovery zone, when we started to appreciate that perhaps our arrival sequence outside was not what it should be, we started to really then advocate to restore. And so through some manipulation, some additional design tweaks and moves, we were able to remove that through the garage, and then which then had an impact of clarity and navigation inside the garage. But then up above, then we really had this opportunity to put something in that, again, provided a sense of reconnection and restoration. As far as interior elements regarding product selection and whatnot, I think that it's about longevity. It's about putting quality items in, items that can take abuse, items that can live and beyond its initial investment value. And then certainly it's more industry norm now, but certainly lighting that goes in is energy efficient. So even though we're really maximizing our moments by pumping in a lot of light, it's low energy lighting. And low maintenance, which then carries down to staff and support for the space.
Specifically in regards to that, also, you can see in the image in the top left there was digital components brought into the space. So from an ease of maintenance, life cycle of product, right? Not taking something physical and throwing it in the landfill. This gives them immediate update to content and information that they were doing at least 4 times a year or more in numerous locations across the campus. So that's been an amazing help for them.
I think that raises a really good point to inform our students that sustainability isn't always an easy one-check box system. It's not necessarily always what's right to pursue LEED, for example. You talked about the longevity of materials. You have to evaluate each project individually and think about its end use. Recycled content, recyclability isn't appropriate for something that's going to stand for 50 or 100 years. Instead, think about product longevity. Right, and so the same with the inclusion of digital. I think that's a different touch point that might be overlooked from a sustainability standpoint, but the inclusion of digital reduces eventually waste, right? So multifaceted aspects, so I appreciate that. This has been a really fantastic project. Congratulations on the project itself. It's really beautiful, it's really amazing, and it's definitely helping to impact children and people's lives in a very positive way. So I hope all of you enjoyed seeing this project. Hopefully it inspired and informed you. And thank you all for tuning in and participating in our Interior Talk Live. We're going to take just a little bit more time and bring in, we have another person from our board here today. We're again in Cincinnati for our Friday forum. And so our board is meeting today and tomorrow for our quarterly meeting. And we have another person to come in and introduce herself, talk just a little bit and give you an update on advocacy issues that are happening within our chapter across our 2 states.
Hi, I'm the VP of Advocacy for Ohio Kentucky chapter. My role as the VP is really to help educate the public about the interior design profession and to give interior designers tools to talk about what we do as interior designers. Currently, Ohio is very busy. We have a bill that's going through the legislation process, if you aren't aware of that. It has passed committee, but we still have another couple of steps to help get this bill into law. A very successful event. Student participation was giant for us at the state capitol event. We showcased student work, and students also were able to meet with local representatives and education from our local schools, Ohio State, Cincinnati, Kent State, and other universities within Ohio is very, very important to our legislators, so please know that you are very important to this process. And this bill will allow interior designers to become certified interior designers. It's a permissive bill, so you have the option to get this certification, and this will just allow designers to work fully within their scope of work. So current status of the bill is we passed committee, yay. Next steps is we need to pass, House of Representatives, Senate, and get it on our governor's table to sign into law. So these next couple of months are very important. After the election, things will start ramping up again to really help educate our local representatives, and we'll be reaching out to students, professionals, and everybody to really touch base with their local representatives. So please keep an eye out for advocacy events in your city centers and for just updates about the bill, just reiterating the information. And yeah, very exciting. And I hope that you guys will be able to participate, and please remember to vote.
Thank you, Shaylin. Thank you again all for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the Interior Talk Live. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.